Well, today is Independence Day, July 4th, 2011, and I thought what better day to review the American Patriots Bible. I got this Bible. I bought it on October 19th, 09. I bought it at the Borders bookstore in Chicago on Michigan Avenue. It's no longer available. That store is no longer there. Anyway, the previous day I had been in New York City at the 24th annual Muslim Day parade, and so anyway, it has things like matrimony and family stuff, children, church records, ancestors. It's got the 50 states and when the state was admitted. First state was Delaware, December 7th, 1787. And last one, Hawaii, August 21st of 59. It's got the military service and death of family members. And here we go. The 7 principles of the Judeo-Christian ethic. Number 1, the dignity of human life. Exodus 20:13 says, "You shall not murder." Matthew 22:39, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." Principle number 2, the traditional monogamous family. Genesis 2:23 and 24, Adam said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. He shall be called woman because he was taken out of man. Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Principle number 3, a national work ethic. 2 Thessalonians 3:10 says, "For even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat." Principle number 4 is the right to a God-centered education. Says, "Did you know that most Americans' oldest universities, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and Dartmouth, were founded by Christian preachers or churches?" Anyway, they've long since drifted from that. Anyway, in Ephesians 6:4, it says, it's hard to get this lined up here, but it says, "And you, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord." Principle 5, the Abrahamic covenant. Genesis 12:1-3 says, "Now the Lord had said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. And in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Principle number 8 is common decency. And Matthew 22:39 says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And on here it says, engraved on a bronze plaque on the base of the Statue of Liberty is the poem "The New Colossus" by Emma Lazarus. It says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest toast to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Principle number 7, our personal accountability to God. Hebrews 9:27 says, "And as it is appointed for men to die once, but after this the judgment." And as Christians, what will the judgment be? It will be reward. Those that have judgment without being a Christian, it will be punishment. Anyway, so that's some of it. Now, throughout the Bible, The general editor was Dr. Richard G. Lee. It was copyright 2009. And looking for the publisher's Thomas Nelson. So you have the standard table of contents with the Bible names, Bible book names, and the page number. There's a chapter summary. And then throughout the Bible there's a, like here, it'll say the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And it says, in November 1861, after a visit to a Union Army camp, Julia Ward Howe wrote the poem that came to be called the Battle Hymn of the Republic. It became the best-known Civil War song of the Union Army, as well as a well-loved American patriotic anthem. And it starts off, "My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I have seen him in the watchfires of 100 circling camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. I have read a fiery gospel, writ in burnished rows of steel. As ye deal with my contemners, so with you my grace shall deal. Let the hero born of woman crush the serpent with his heel, since God is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the heart of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. In the beauty of the lilies, Christ was born across the sea with a glory with a glory in his bosom that transfigures you and me. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on. So you can see there is quite a connection between that and Christianity. In Genesis 3:15 it says, "He shall bruise your head and you shall bruise his heel." I just made a note, hero, where he, H-E, rose, R for rose, and O was omnipotently. I always make acronyms. Anyway, there's just all kinds of things. If you flip through, you'll come across some thick things. I'm going to flip to this, the Great Awakening. I put 5 stars down this page. It says, Jonathan Edwards began preaching in Northampton, Massachusetts in 1734. The moral conditions were in extreme low, as was prevalent throughout most of the American colonies. Under his preaching that stressed the importance of an immediate personal spiritual rebirth, a revival began in his church among the youth, and then spread to the adults. That's interesting. Edwards wrote that in the spring and summer following, in Anno 1735, the town seemed to be so full of the presence of God, it never was so full of love nor of joy, and yet so full of distress as it was then. In 2 years, 300 converts were added to the church, and news of the revival spread throughout New England. And then at the British Methodist preacher George Whitefield continued the movement, making 7 separate trips to America and spending 9 years preaching across the colonies. He preached to 5,000 on the Boston Commons and 8,000 at once in the open fields. And between 1740 and 1742, an estimated 25 to 50,000 people were added to the New England church, changing the regional's moral tone and gaining the name of a Great Awakening. The revival spread into the middle colonies, beginning in New Jersey, largely among the Presbyterians trained under William Tennant, including his son Gilbert, who became the leading figure of the Great Awakening in the middle colonies. The revival reached the South with the preaching of Samuel Davies among the Presbyterians of Virginia, 1748 to 59, with the great success of the Baptists in North Carolina in the 1760s, and with the rapid spread of Methodism shortly before the American Revolution. Because of the Great Awakening served to build up interests that were intercolonial in character and increased opposition to the Anglican Church and the royal officials who supported it, many historians say it helped set in motion a democratic spirit that eventually brought America into political freedom. It also resulted in an outburst of missionary activity among Native Americans by such men as David Brainerd, and it was the impetus to the first movement of importance against slavery. In education, it led to the founding of a number of academies and colleges, notably Princeton, Brown, Rutgers, and Dartmouth. By the year 1800, nearly 1 million people had made it their way west, settling in the areas west of the Blue Ridge in Virginia, in Kentucky, Tennessee, in the Northwest, and in the Indian Territory. Most did not have access to a church, and moral conditions once again went into the decline. However, a second great spiritual revival began that continued into the 1830s. Many historians refer to Logan County in Kentucky as the starting point, where several Methodist and Presbyterian ministers joined efforts in 1799, and visitors to the revival would camp out for 2 or 3 nights. One such gathering was held at Cane Ridge, Kentucky in 1801 and drew perhaps as many as 15 to 20,000 people. More than 10,000 people were swept into the Kentucky churches between 1800 and 1803. It reminds me of the camping at the Creation Fest in central Pennsylvania. Anyway, the Great Revival quickly spread through Kentucky, Tennessee, and southern Ohio. The Methodists had created an efficient organization of districts of churches, each of which would be served by circuit riders, preachers who traveled from church to church to preach and minister, especially in rural areas. The circuit riders came from among the common people, which helped them establish a rapport with the frontier families they hoped to bring to faith. They promoted Sunday schools in which children were taught reading, writing, and arithmetic. The Second Great Awakening was primarily on personal salvation experienced in revival meetings. It accomplished far more than that, for it had a greater impact on secular society than any other American history through its vast social concern. Through a multitude of channels, this revival encouraged Christians to become involved in causes dealing with prison reform, temperance, women's suffrage, and the crusade to abolish slavery. For instance, Charles Finney, one of the greatest American preachers in the 1800s, became the president of Oberlin College in Ohio. He supported giving freedom to the slaves, and it was a busy station for the Underground Railroad. He was one of the first. Oberlin was among the first American colleges to co-educate blacks and women with white men. By 1834, the budget of this society was nearly as large as the federal budget of that time. Wow. During the revivals that Finney held in Boston, 50,000 people put their faith in Christ. What will you do with Jesus Christ? Hundreds of thousands put their faith in Christ and went on to exert a profound spiritual and social impact. That's all the time that I have for right now, and more to come.